YouTube. 15 years old. 15 years of obscure pop culture comedy in the form of YouTube poops. 15 years of AMVs. 15 years of internet celebrities.
It's Weed Day. It's also Hitler's birthday and the anniversary of Columbine, so, 1 out of 3 being okay isn't bad.
And 15 years of controversy.
Andy, I'm not you! Get Viagra! Get Viagra so you can fucking vamp properly! Beat your fucking ass!
YouTube has had its good moments.
Go to the bathroom!
Not yet.
You're shitting yourself!
Not yet.
And its bad moments.
There's no backing by science, but if people feel this way, isn't that enough backing? Isn't that like... I don't know, like...
During that time, YouTube fame and controversy of some individuals led to what we call sagas. So strap in and revisit some of the most notable sagas to have occurred on YouTube since its beginning. Hello friends and subscribers, and welcome to episode 12 of History of YouTube Sagas. The second episode of season 3. I'd like to apologize for it being so late. The amount of time between this episode and episode 11 is almost the same amount of time between episode 10 in February 2017 and the start of season 3 in October 2020. But on the plus side, I guarantee episode 13 will not be the video I put out next, but the video afterwards. But anyway... Today we have got a first for the series. For today we'll be looking back not on an infamous YouTuber, a feud, or corporate shenanigans, but rather a YouTube documentary will be the topic of this video, and everything surrounding the impact of said documentary. The video in question is the nearly 30-minute internet documentary Kony 2012, uploaded by Invisible Children in March of 2012. A viral video and a viral documentary, and I can't think of an internet documentary with such a sudden, large amount of attention given to it and an immediate effect on public discourse for the weeks after its initial launch. But was it the first internet or YouTube documentary? Well, no. Actually, far from it. YouTube first went online in 2005 alongside Google Video, and that same year the internet got its first blockbuster. A documentary, even. The documentary Loose Change, put together by 3 college kids. Loose Change helped popularize the conspiracy theory surrounding 9/11. The documentary argued that 9/11 was not the work of Saudi and Egyptian hijackers working for Al-Qaeda, but was a false flag operation perpetrated by the United States government in order to justify the war on terror and the building of the American police state. There may have been other popular internet documentaries between Loose Change and Kony 2012, but we're not going over them here. So, what is Kony 2012 about? To summarize, the documentary was an expose of Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony and a call for the people of the world to put pressure on the world's governments to help bring him to justice. Now, Uganda has a meme-worthy history in and of itself, which we will get to provide some brief context. Uganda was a part of the British Empire for many years until it became an independent state in 1962, the same year that King Kong vs. Godzilla and Dr. No came out. Uganda became a republic, and its first president was Edward Mutesa, who led the country until 1966, when Milton Obote overthrew him. Obote led the country until his own overthrow in 1971 by one Idi Amin. And this is where Uganda got plenty of attention from the West. Idi Amin is right up there with Mobutu Sese Seko of Zaire as the quintessential eccentric African dictator. And while Amin portrayed himself as eccentric and buffoonish with his collection of self-awarded titles such as His Excellency, President for Life, Field Marshal Al-Haji Dr. Idi Amin Dada, VC, DSO, MC, CBE, Lord of all the beasts of the earth and fishes of the sea, and Conqueror of the British Empire in Africa in general and Uganda in particular. The Conqueror of the British Empire title is the boldest of all, which he awarded to himself after the United Kingdom broke off all diplomatic relations with Uganda in 1977. He also considered himself the last King of Scotland, which is why the 2006 movie about him starring Forrest Whitaker is named as such. As one could see, this behavior led him to becoming a popular comedic target in the West during his time.
Thank you very much. My name Idi Amin Dada. That's 2 A's, 3 D's, and 1 gun. I tell you something. I come here tonight to speak in defense of the US of A. That's right, compared to my country, Uganda. You speak of my country in bad terms, always negatively. First, I'd like to say, Uganda is not Cleveland. You cannot apply Cleveland principles to Uganda. These are wonderful people here. I love this country. I love American people. I want to say I had 2 for lunch. I only make little jokes. I always like to make little jokes. No, we had turkey for lunch. And I did not kill the turkey. Turkey died in car accident.
The truth is, however, Idi Amin used his image to conceal the fact he was actually a very cunning, cold, and calculating individual. He was initially welcomed by the West, supported by the UK and Israel, but quickly became hostile towards both countries, and found the support of autocratic regimes like Mobutu's Zaire, Muammar Gaddafi's Libya, the USSR, and East Germany. Starting in 1972, the year after he came to power, Idi Amin expelled Uganda's South Asian population and handed their businesses over to inexperienced local Ugandans.
I took this decision for the economy of Uganda, and I must make sure that every Ugandans get a fruit of independence. Since actually Uganda is not yet independent, I will say that, even when the British handed over on the 9th of October 1962, the Uganda is still not yet independent. Uganda will be independent after this, my decision, after I want to see that the whole Kampala street is not full of Indians. It must be proper black, and administration in those shops is run by the Ugandans.
Would you like to get all Asians out, really, sir?
Yes, they must go to their country.
In 1976, he allowed pro-Palestinian hijackers refuge at the airport in Entebbe, where they held 106 Israeli citizens hostage after hijacking a plane from Israel and bound initially for Paris. Interestingly, years prior, Israeli engineers helped build the airport at Entebbe, and the Mossad was able to locate the blueprints to devise a daring rescue plan. This led to a raid on the airport by Israeli paratroopers, who were able to rescue all but 4 of the hostages. Fun fact, Yoni Netanyahu, the older brother of current Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, was the one IDF soldier killed during the raid. Interestingly, years before coming to power, Idi Amin himself was trained as a paratrooper by the Israeli Self-Defense Forces and was reportedly good friends with Moish Dayan, the chief of staff of the IDF during that time.
But I'm trained as a paratrooper in Israel. But I have got a very good brain, and even General Dayan knows that I am very good field officer.
You know Dayan very well?
I know him, and he has been my friend. He has been giving me dinner, luncheon in his house. If I go to Israel, I used to stay with Dayan. He brings Air Force band playing for me. We stay together.
Apart from that, Idi Amin was not shy about viciously murdering those he perceived as domestic opponents of his rule. He was also rumored to be a cannibal, though still, as of 2023, there is no documented evidence of cannibalism by Idi Amin, other than hearsay and one ambiguous statement from the man himself. Idi Amin was eventually overthrown in early January 1979 following a failed invasion of Tanzania when Tanzanian forces were able to push the Ugandans back into Uganda and went straight for the capital city of Kampala. Idi Amin fled the country in April 1979, and he was provided asylum in Libya and later in Saudi Arabia until he died in 2003. It is estimated that anywhere between 100,000 to 500,000 Ugandans perished due to Idi Amin's rule. His callous disregard for human life and vicious anti-Semitism can be clearly demonstrated in one infamous interview.
But is it true that you said Hitler didn't kill enough Jews during the war?
Throughout 1979 and 1980, Uganda went through a series of interim presidents before Milton Obote returned to power in December of 1980. Uganda descended into civil war in the early to mid-80s, known as the Ugandan Bush War. Obote was once again overthrown at the end of the Bush War, and his death toll of Ugandans was almost as bad or just as bad as Amin's, depending on the estimates. Yoweri Museveni became Obote's permanent replacement in 1986. Although in power, Museveni's government still faced armed opposition, and Uganda entered a new 8-year civil war from 1986 to 1994. This is the war where we would see the beginning and rise of the Lord's Resistance Army, the Ugandan rebel group that is part of the centerpiece of this episode's topic, and it was founded and led by one Joseph Kony. Even after the Civil War ended in 1994, the Lord's Resistance Army continued to wage an armed insurgency against the Ugandan government. However, this would go largely unnoticed by the general public of the outside world for many years to come. Though it is worth mentioning that in 2001, following the 9/11 terrorist attacks and the launching of the War on Terror, the United States government officially recognized the Lord's Resistance Army as a terrorist organization. Nearly a decade later, Uganda became meme-worthy once again in either 2010 or 2011, when an excerpt from the Missionaries of Hate, a documentary aimed at exposing Uganda's draconian anti-gay and anti-sodomy legislation, brought us this.
I've taken time to do a little research to know what homosexuals do in the privacy of their bedroom. One of the things they do is called anal leaking, where a man's anus is leaked like this by the other person, like ice cream. And then what happens, even poo-poo comes out. The other one poo-poo's out, and then they eat the poo-poo. The other one they do is they have a sex practice called fisting, where they insert their hand into the other man's hand, and it goes into the anus all the way. And it is so painful, they have to take drugs, but they enjoy it. Now, if we have any children, please step out. This is a parental guidance moment. That child can be moved out. So I've done research. This is what they do. Number one, you can see a man here having sucked the other person's rectum, and the other person is poo-pooing, and this one is eating the poo-poo all over the place. Tell me, when you have a law against homosexuality, do you say except eating poo-poo? I mean, look at this guy sincerely. Bishop. Stagafullah Isaha. Hajat. We do not want this sickness. This is sick, and it's therefore deviant. We do not want it.
Not gonna lie, back in high school, I had an IRL friend, with whom I'm still friends with, loved to quote that all the time, much to my annoyance. A year later, Uganda would receive international attention with the subject of this episode. On March 5th, 2012, a video entitled Kony 2012 was uploaded to YouTube by Invisible Children. It was a 30-minute documentary directed and starring one Jason Russell.
You made it.
My name is Jason Russell, and this is my son, Gavin. Humanity's greatest desire is to belong and connect. And now we see each other. We hear each other.
Grandpa, I love you. I love you.
I want to take a picture.
We share what we love, and it reminds us what we all have in common.
I got a lot.
The next 27 minutes are an experiment. But in order for it to work, you have to pay attention.
In the documentary, we learn about Jason Russell and his new life's purpose, making Ugandan warlord Joseph Kony famous, hoping he will one day face justice. Russell first came to Uganda in early 2003 with several college friends hoping to find a story. He explains that the Lord's Resistance Army attacked the convoy he was riding in along the way, and by the time they got to the cities, the first thing they found shocked them.
You go to school here?
Yes.
Yes, that's how you know English so well.
I know.
Yeah. How many nights have you stayed here?
Hello. You are making our work very, very difficult. You stop that now.
The night I first met Jacob, he told me what he and other children in northern Uganda were living through.
We worried the rebel when they raise us again, then they will kill us. My brother tried to escape. Then they killed using panga. They cut his neck.
Did you see it?
I saw.
We fear that if we sleep at our home, we can be abducted by the rebels because our home is far away from town.
They will catch us, then will take us there in the bush. So come here to save our life.
Hundreds of children from the countryside all huddled in the middle of the city just to spend the night, to avoid being abducted and enslaved by Joseph Kony's Lord's Resistance Army, who conducted midnight raids on villages on a regular basis. They would return to their homes in the morning. This scenery, coupled with the Ugandan military's inability to suppress the LRA, inspired Jason to take on Joseph Kony and end his brutality to be his life's purpose. Interestingly, Jason Russell is a devout Christian, and the Lord's Resistance Army styles itself as a Christian democratic organization. According to Joseph Kony, the group's end goal is to overthrow the current government of Uganda, implement multi-party democracy, and introduce a constitution based on the Ten Commandments. Some find the LRA's Christian credentials dubious, although Joseph Kony was known to speak disparagingly of Christians who ate pork. Nevertheless, the Lord's Resistance Army's tactics of performing midnight raids on villages in the countryside to kidnap young boys to fight in their ranks, and kidnap young girls to be the sex slaves of Kony and his other officers, would certainly appall Jesus, as it appalled Jason Russell. This is why in 2004, Jason Russell founded the Invisible Children as his charity to help raise enough awareness and money to bring Joseph Kony to justice. They also limited screenings of their first documentary, the namesake, Invisible Children, which received a wider release in 2006. So interestingly, the first documentary Russell put together about Joseph Kony and his Lord's Resistance Army wasn't even Kony 2012. But over the years, Jason Russell pushed his activism to little attention or fanfare. Hence why the goal of Kony 2012 was to make Mr. Kony famous. Like any piece of Uganda, it makes Joseph Kony out to be the evilest man alive. Otherwise, why would anyone give a shit about a once obscure Ugandan warlord?
For 26 years, Kony has been kidnapping children into his rebel group, the LRA, turning the girls into sex slaves, and the boys into child soldiers. He makes them mutilate people's faces, and he forces them to kill their own parents. And this is not just a few children. It's been over 30,000 of them. And Jacob was one of those children. As if Kony's crimes aren't bad enough, he is not fighting for any cause, but only to maintain his power. He is not supported by anyone, and he has repeatedly used peace talks to rearm and murder again and again.
Kony, different times, proposed peace.
He's really evil, and Jason Russell wants his son to grow up in a world without Joseph Kony's, even though dictators, warlords, and horrible people in general are a fact of life. But who's to say we shouldn't try to bring these bad actors to justice? Jason Russell even has a prosecutor from the International Criminal Court to weigh in to add credibility to his cause.
Kony, different times, proposed peace and then just regain strength and attack.
This is the head prosecutor for the International Criminal Court. In 2002, when the court was started, their job was to find and demand the arrest of the world's worst criminals. Although there are a lot of warlords, murderers, and dictators in the world, the perversity of Kony's crimes made him first on the court's list.
Kony is the first guy indicted by the ICC. But the crimes basically are these: crimes against humanity and war crimes committed against the civilian population, including murder, sexual slavery, rapes, abductions. We need to plan how to arrest Kony. Start to plan and start to be serious. In fact, the only way to stop Kony is showing him, "Guy, we're going to arrest you."
But what about the individual viewer? What could they do to help bring Joseph Kony to justice? Well, one could share the documentary on Facebook and other social media sites, and that would be the biggest help of all. But Jason Russell has a bigger plan than that.
I have a plan. You just have to trust me.
For years, I have been telling you, trust the plan.
There is also an action kit supporters could purchase for $30. It contained a t-shirt, a button, some posters, and a few other miscellaneous items. The plan was called Cover the Night. In a little over a month's time, on April 20th, 2012, so on 4/20, Hitler's birthday, and the 13th anniversary of Columbine, the activists went into their hometowns under the cover of darkness to hang up posters in places where the general public would see them. The next morning, everyone would see them, and this would naturally solicit media attention and bring further notice to the cause. It was perfect. So with all that, the documentary was uploaded on March 5th, 2012. Jason's goal was to reach 500,000 viewers by the end of 2012. But much to his pleasant surprise, within 48 hours of uploading the video, Kony 2012 had already amassed more than 100 times that number. Overnight, the documentary became a sensation, and everyone was talking about it the next day.
Someone probably sent you the video shining a spotlight on a brutal warlord in Africa, Joseph Kony. It was posted on Monday, and as of this moment, it has been seen nearly 40 million times.
The big campaign that really caught my attention was the one that started within 24 hours ago, and a lot of you probably heard about it. It's called Kony 2012, and I can't really explain it to you because I suck at explaining, so I'll put a link down here to the video so you can get some background information. You can just pause this and then go watch it and then come back and watch this again.
Until this week, few Americans had heard of Joseph Kony or the atrocities he is said to have committed in Central Africa. But watch what happened when a charity posted a video on the internet to raise awareness about Kony and his alleged crimes. On Monday, the video had been viewed 66,000 times. The next day, 9,600,000 views. And today, 50 million and counting. In less than a week, it's become the most viral video ever.
If you guys have been on the internet at all in the last day, you have come across something known as Kony 2012. And this is like an online campaign to basically raise awareness of this despicable guy in Africa by the name of Joseph Kony. Now, he is the leader of something known as the Lord's Resistance Army.
Oh my gosh, so trendy, and we're gonna get Kony.
And you can tell they're government operatives. They've got like evil in their eyes, you know, hardcore. I mean, their real spirit is, murder Africa, invasion force, release us.
Speaking from experience, I was a senior in high school when Kony 2012 came out, and it was all we talked about in my world literature class a day or two after its release. So the documentary achieved its first goal of making Kony famous. Everyone was talking about him. Now the tricky part was bringing him to justice. Of course, it's not like a dangerous man like Kony would turn himself in should an international arrest warrant be issued now that every teenage white girl in America and their grandma knew who he was. He would likely need to be detained by a military force of some kind. And since the Ugandan military proved ineffective to this task, people suggested it should be on the United States Army to do so. That conclusion was kind of a blow to myself and others at the time. You see, a few months earlier, in December 2011, the United States finally withdrew from Iraq after 8 years of needless war. The other young people who came of age during the War on Terrorism in the 2000s and I were wary of U.S. intervention in conflicts that didn't pose an unambiguous or immediate threat to the United States, especially with the Bush administration lying its way into Iraq. And yet, many young people, when this documentary came out, suddenly forgot about the consequences of such wars and called for the U.S. military to be deployed to Uganda to stop Kony. So it was like, well, there goes the consensus among non-interventionism among my generation. Even Hitler supported such a move.
Dem Feind gelungen, die Front in weiter Formation zu durchbrechen. Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor. Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg, Karlshorst gelangt.
Mit dem Angriff Steiners wird das alles in Ordnung kommen.
Mein Führer, Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl! Wer schickt Sie? Dass Sie es wagen, sich meinen Befehl zu widersetzen! Und weit ist es also gekommen. Das Militär hat mich belogen! Jeder hat mich belogen, sogar die SS! Die gesamte Generalität ist nichts weiter als ein Haufen niederträchtiger, treuloser Feiglinge!
Mein Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie verbringen...
Nicht als Feiglinge! Verreiter, Versager!
Mein Führer, was Sie da sagen, ist ungeheuerlich!
Die Generalität ist das Geschmolz des deutschen Volkes!
Well, the thing is, Hitler, Bin Laden is responsible for the deaths of 3,000 Americans on 9/11, and was responsible for the deaths on the USS Cole in 2000, and the American embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania in 1998. Bin Laden ran Al-Qaeda, an international terrorist organization capable of waging multiple terrorist attacks and armed insurgencies around the world with $1 billion at its beck and call. If you ignore the theocratic end goals of Al-Qaeda, it is arguably the closest thing we have to a real-life specter.
Spectre? Spectre. Special Executive for Counterintelligence, Terrorism, Revenge, Extortion.
Joseph Kony, on the other hand, even at the LRA's peak power, was at worst a localized threat to Uganda and the countries adjacent to it. Kony and his Lord's Resistance Army has never threatened, let alone attacked the US in any way. That's why the US went after bin Laden as hard as they did and aren't interested in devoting large amounts of money, resources, and manpower to get Kony. Although another fun fact, I had an initial exposure to Invisible Children before they went viral in March of 2012. In January of 2012, like 2 months earlier, it was still the first semester of my senior year of high school, and it was wrapping up. That semester, I was enrolled in a class called Holocaust and Human Behavior. The course, as its name suggests, teaches about the rise of Hitler and the National Socialists, and specifically what led to the Holocaust and how they were able to carry it out during the war from a sociological perspective. For a final group project, our groups were to all research a humanitarian cause, present it to the class, and later do an after-school presentation on it, and even try to raise money for it. While my group did a project raising money for wounded Palestinian kids, a group of girls in the class did Invisible Children. At the time, they were still trying to fundraise for radio so individual Ugandans could become more aware of impending attacks by the LRA. Anyway, back to the documentary. Yes, Invisible Children and their Kony 2012 documentary lit up YouTube like no other documentary had before. Its sudden popularity led to the legacy media coverage, and the entire world knowing who Joseph Kony was, and wanting to do whatever it took to bring him to justice. Donations and purchases of the action kits helped Invisible Children raise over $20 million. Things were going pretty well for the most part. And with that, all Jason and Invisible Children needed to do was keep their efforts going and keep the coverage positive. However, due to this video gaining so much attention at an unprecedented rate, it was only a matter of time before the information provided in the video and its claims were brought to scrutiny. While there is nothing wrong with trying to bring a war criminal to justice, however, it doesn't really help your case when your documentary does not present an accurate picture of the overall situation surrounding said war criminal. You see, Kony 2012 falls under the category of documentaries you can classify as DocUganda. A documentary that, in addition to informing the audience of the subject matter, pushes them to feel and think a certain way about it. It wants you to see Kony as a bad guy and support the cause of invisible children. Other examples of people who make documentaries that are DocUganda in nature are far-left filmmaker Michael Moore and conservative filmmaker Dinesh D'Souza. The most notable and valid criticism of Kony 2012 was it presented Uganda as a war-torn country gripped in an intense civil conflict between the Ugandan government and the LRA, with the documentary only making one or two passing mentions that the LRA's current whereabouts were actually Uganda's neighbors of South Sudan, the Congo, and the Central African Republic. The LRA and Joseph Kony have been absent from Uganda since 2006, 6 years before Kony 2012 was released. Uganda had been relatively peaceful since then, which is why the people of Uganda and its government had a particularly negative view of Kony 2012.
I hope somebody will have the courtesy to put a disclaimer that this is what used to happen. This is not current. Because certainly what is in that documentary is totally the opposite of what's happening now.
When the Kony 2012 video came out, there was this general feeling that it oversimplified the story of Uganda and also the story of northern Uganda, but also it did not tell the current stories of people in northern Uganda and the current challenges. But also we saw that the story was grossly mistold. So we thought that the storytellers in this video could have done better if they really tried to include more local voices, but also trying to include past initiatives in northern Uganda in the war. The war had been going on for 26 years. So we thought in these 26 years, of course, there are Ugandans who have done great to try to bring the war to an end. And indeed, great Ugandans made a contribution to bring peace to northern Uganda, the peace that we have currently for the last 5 years.
What I see in that video is that it shows the one-dimensional approach of Africa, and Uganda being an African country, it shows that we fit in this approach of poor, helpless, and defenseless, which isn't the case.
Every focus right now, even the government of Uganda is focusing the attention primarily on how to deal with the nodding disease. It came at a time when Kony 2012 video came out, and I thought it was for a good cause, but the message was very different. It was not the most pressing issue affecting the people of northern Uganda. It was not the most pressing issue affecting, let's say, the adults, and certainly not the most pressing issue facing the children in northern Uganda.
2006 was also the last confirmed sighting of Joseph Kony. Because of this, many people began speculating that Joseph Kony had been dead for years and began to pass that speculation off as fact. And because of that speculation, some people began to suspect that Kony 2012 was made with sinister ulterior motives in mind.
So I thought I would make this video in sequence to my dislike for this whole Stop Kony campaign. The reason why that I'm against it is because, well, I think it's a bunch of bullshit. Now, I am 100% Ugandan. Both of my parents were born and raised in Uganda, and I tend to visit there from time to time. So, last night I just see that this is like a trending topic on Twitter, and like this video has like millions and millions of views, and it's about Uganda and Kony. So I asked my mom, and my mom laughs and goes, "He died like 5 years ago." So why are they making it seem like Uganda is one big hellhole because of Kony? Because it's not. So this video isn't really giving you the correct information. So before you go out and you're like, stop Kony 2012 and change your Facebook profile picture and make all these tweets about Kony, you should probably educate yourself. I mean, you shouldn't base it off of one YouTube video that a guy makes $90,000 a year for making these videos. He doesn't make it because he flies around the country and feels bad and decides he's gonna sit at home and make this fantastic video to hope to make the world a better place. No, he is making a great living off of this. I mean, it's great if you want to send donations to anywhere for any causes, but you should probably do that through somewhere more trustworthy.
And when I saw the group Invisible Children with all these movie stars and all these groups come out with basically a pro-war, pro-invasion call, and their film got 37 million views in just 3 or 4 days, and I saw the State Department behind it and all this propaganda and members of Congress pushing it, I knew that something was going on. Just like the babies in the incubators, all of it. This has nothing to do with actually trying to help people there.
Beneath the scenic shorelines of Lake Albert, under the water and the lagoons, there are riches. Enough oil to dramatically change the fortune of Uganda. In full production, around 150,000 barrels of oil a day will be pumped out of this area.
The truth was, Joseph Kony, despite having not been seen since 2006, didn't mean he was dead. For example, Whitey Bulger, a Boston area gangster, went into hiding in December 1994 after being placed on top of the FBI's top 10 most wanted list, and wasn't seen again until he was finally caught in June 2011. He lasted a little more than 15 years in hiding, and while he was still confirmed to be alive, imagine being on the internet in the year 2000, and the discourse about trying to find him was, well, he hasn't been seen alive in 6 years, therefore he must be dead. Yeah, about as smooth-brained as it gets. Nevertheless, despite the criticism, Kony 2012 succeeded in making Joseph Kony famous. But Joseph Kony was not the only man to become famous because of Kony 2012. People were also becoming just as interested, if not even more interested, in the man behind it, Jason Russell. As previously mentioned, upon visiting Uganda in 2003 and seeing the horror of the Lord's Resistance Army firsthand, Jason Russell made it his life's purpose to find Joseph Kony. Like Sam and Nia in the previous episode, Jason Russell is also a devout Christian, so the kind of person who will not be listening to black metal bands like Impaled Nazarene. Before his first trip to Uganda, he took up theater, as his family had a background in it. After returning from his first trip to Uganda, he founded Invisible Children in 2004. Also, as previously mentioned, Kony 2012 was not the first documentary put out by Invisible Children. In 2006, the same year Kony left Uganda, Invisible Children put out the namesake documentary that saw a limited screening at specific documentary film festivals. It was also during that year that friggin' High School Musical on the Disney Channel aired. Jason, using his theatrical past to further his new cause, put this together.
Let's bring it. Okay, then let's give them what they want. Let's do what we always do. Dance!
inside your mind. They're in bad times. We gotta shake it up and break it up and let the war without a gun.
That was a once obscure video from 2006 that came to light during the whole Kony 2012 craze in the spring of 2012. And because of what we saw, people began to speculate that Jason Russell was a homosexual. He's not. He has a kid, and he just has a passion for theater. There's nothing wrong with straight men liking theater and dancing, I suppose. I mean, I did an after-school drama club in middle school, but anyway, Jason Russell himself also became famous as a result of Kony 2012. And yes, at one point, people were more interested in him than in Joseph Kony, the subject of the documentary. And shortly after Kony 2012 was released, Mr. Russell was constantly flying around the country, performing several interviews a day.
And then it's like, can you take a call from Ryan Seacrest? Can you do this? It was...
All the media of the world. All the media of the world.
And I was so excited because we were excited to get local news.
And at the time you were doing everything. I mean, in a span of a few days, you were CNN.
I think it was 17 interviews in 48 hours.
Wow.
So it was like 10 in LA, red eye to New York. I couldn't sleep on the plane. I was too excited. By the end of that day, my mind was exhausted. My mind was starting to become so defensive because every chair that I sat in, it was, what about this and what about that and what about that?
I mean, this guy made Iron Maiden during their World Slavery Tour look like they were only running the 1 mile marathon as opposed to the Boston Marathon. With this sudden break-free interviewing schedule, Mr. Russell started to miss out on sleep. This would already begin to take a toll on his mental health, but things would only start to get worse. With Jason Russell constantly in the spotlight, coupled with earlier criticisms of Kony 2012, people started to foment personal criticisms of Jason Russell, saying that he was only doing this for his own vanity or private financial gain. Videos on YouTube began popping up claiming that Invisible Children was a scam or were frauds, and because of this, people started asking valid questions like, why did he frequently inject himself and his son into the documentary? Why didn't Invisible Children emphasize that Kony hasn't been in Uganda since 2006 and was likely hiding in one of the country's neighbors? And why only a third of the money actually went to on-the-ground efforts in Uganda? And then, some detractors unfairly started placing the responsibility for Invisible Children's end goals on Jason Russell himself. What was his personal plan for stopping kids from being abducted? And how was he going to implement it? How would he ensure that all the money he raised for Kony 2012 would be accounted for? How was Jason Russell going to personally bring Joseph Kony to justice? And if this video failed to lead to Joseph Kony's capture, then it would be Jason Russell's fault, and therefore he was defrauding everyone who donated to his charity.
Where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Where is he?
This further added to his already heavy stress of non-stop interviewing and lack of sleep. To relieve some of this constant stress and attention, Jason and his family tried to take a mini vacation to a resort in Palm Springs. Things were going well until the people there also recognized him and started giving him even more unwanted attention. With no further options, Jason and his family decided to seclude themselves in their hotel room with the doors locked and the curtains drawn. Now, this may have worked even as little as 5 years earlier, when YouTube and other social media sites were still in their infancy. Smartphones were also in their infancy at the time, but most people were still using flip phones. But by 2012, pretty much everyone had a smartphone by that point, and therefore, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, what have you, they were just as portable as your wallet or a pack of gum. It was still there.
You think I want to escape from this? There is no escape from this.
Jason was almost at his wit's end. He made one last attempt to escape the seemingly never-ending publicity by taking his family to see The Lorax. I mean, you're going to a movie theater to see a kid's movie. The other adults will probably be too busy tending to their kids to even notice Jason. And with your phone meant to be off during the movie, he now has an excuse to turn off his phone and not deal with the constant messaging.
My phone was getting 10 text messages every second. It was just going. And then it's like, can you take a call from Ryan Seacrest? But can you do this?
Well, this sounded like a good idea on paper. Sadly, by then, it was too little, too late. As Jason watched The Lorax, a movie based on a children's book written by Dr. Seuss before Jason was born, and the film being complete well before people had even heard of him or Invisible Children, Jason Russell's sanity had already temporarily vacated him. During the film, he believed it was speaking directly to him, telling him he had to get to New York by the next day or else Kony would win somehow. And with no way to get to New York that quickly, and with the dreaded prospect of Kony winning, the heavy toll of constant interviewing, little to no sleep, and mountains worth of criticism, both fair and unfair, it finally broke Jason Russell, and this is what happened next.
What? Give him devil.
Yes, that is Jason Russell. He had a completely naked mental breakdown in the middle of Palm Springs. A couple of people caught the scene on video and sold it to TMZ for $30,000. Mr. Russell was subsequently apprehended and was taken to a nearby hospital for a psych evaluation. At the time, it was frequently misreported that he was arrested. He wasn't. As I said, he was taken to a hospital. It was also widely circulated that he was on drugs, and he was not. And of course, it was also widely circulated that Jason was playing with himself and vandalizing nearby cars during his breakdown. There is absolutely no evidence of him vandalizing cars or of him playing with himself. When he was taken to the hospital, he was tested for drug use and nothing came up. And bizarre and off the wall as the episode was, it was not a laughing matter. The man had a psychotic breakdown and could have seriously harmed himself or somebody else, which is why he was taken to the hospital and not jail. He was not charged with the indecent exposure because he would have probably been found not guilty by reason of insanity. That last sentence should not be construed as legal advice. I am not an attorney. However, even at the hospital, Jason was combative with the staff trying to help him to the point where he needed to be forcibly sedated. By his own admission, it took Jason nearly 2 weeks to completely recover his mental health. But at least for the moment, with his being hospitalized, the attention of the media and the world at large shifted away from him shortly after that. And while this was definitely embarrassing for Mr. Russell and brought the wrong kind of attention to himself and his cause, this did not demoralize the Invisible Children faithful, as the videos were still receiving attention and Invisible Children was still raising quite a bit of money. Finally, the calendar turned, and 420 in the year 2012 AD dawned. Into the night the activists went. The day of action was upon us, and the end result was...
Drum roll, please. Drum roll.
Joy to the world.
Beautiful. Oh, talk about pissing your money away. Oh, I hope you kids see what a silly waste of resources this was.
You worked really hard, Grandma.
So do washing machines.
shockingly abysmal to the point where attendance at the Day of Action protests in several major cities was virtually non-existent. While the Facebook events captured thousands, if not tens of thousands of attendees, when the Day of Action came, anywhere from a dozen to 2 or 3 dozen attendees showed up. In fact, at the planned protests in Montreal, Canada, the city where the infamous Montreal Screwjob occurred some 15 years prior, 0 out of the nearly 5,000 registered attendees attended the event. Instead, the associated Facebook page canceled the event and denounced Invisible Children as frauds. So, with this turnout, we come to another major criticism of Kony 2012. That is, its internet-centered campaign gave rise to slacktivism. While actual on-the-ground activism requires effort, internet-based slacktivism was easy. The end goal was to make Kony famous, right? I could make him famous. So really, all one really had to do was share the video and you did your part. You can already feel the heartbeat of those Ugandan kids you just saved by merely sharing a viral video that had already amassed several million views by that point. Hey, if you want to contribute more, why not make your profile picture or profile banner on Facebook, Kony 2012? And voila, you just saved God knows how many more kids. You just helped rescue plenty of kids with a few clicks. Don't even bother buying those silly action kits or passing out flyers. Writing to your congressman is so 20th century. While there were still plenty of people who supported Invisible Children and actually did more for it other than just share the video and change their profile picture. In fact, after I graduated from high school, the year after, an Invisible Children after-school club was set up at my old school. But anyway, apart from the handful of genuinely dedicated activists, the overwhelming majority of people who saw Kony 2012, especially young people, did not really care for learning about Kony, the LRA, or the situation in Uganda. Sharing the videos was their way to feel good about themselves without actually doing anything of substance. Because remember, you sharing that video was all you needed to do. One person you got to see Kony 2012 equals one rescued child. And if you have 350 Facebook friends and they all saw it, you just saved 350 kids from Kony's clutches. Self-evident of the slacktivism nature of most of those who boldly championed the cause of Invisible Children but did nothing for it other than watch the video and share it, were outed in a clever internet scheme that was cultivated around that time. It was simple. Trolls would take this still frame of actor Carl Weathers as Dylan in the first Predator movie, post it to either Facebook or Twitter, and the poster, in order to lure out the slacktivists, would pretend to be an edgelord and caption it with something like, "I love this guy," or "This man is amazing," all without mentioning who was in the picture. Slacktivists, assuming it's Kony, would take the bait by commenting with outrage like, "How dare you! Kony is a monster!" And then the OP would play gotcha by revealing that the man in the picture is actually Carl Weathers in Predator rather than the Ugandan warlord. Because, you know, all black people look the same according to these slacktivists, I guess. So with the day of action over, Jason Russell recovering from a mental breakdown, no shortage of criticism, both legitimate and illegitimate, depressingly low turnout, slacktivism aplenty, and Kony not being captured, one might conclude that Kony 2012 was a failure, and a train wreck failure at that. But the thing is, you're wrong if that's your conclusion. Remember, the goal of Kony 2012 was to make Joseph Kony, a once obscure Ugandan warlord, famous. And it worked. Joseph Kony from 2012 onwards became a household name. People know who he is just as much as they know who Osama bin Laden is. And I bet most of the people watching this video already knew who Joseph Kony was before they clicked on it. And I bet most of them learned about him through the Kony 2012 video when it first came out 11 years ago. That is proof Kony 2012 was ultimately a success. If this was a mass marketing and advertising campaign, Don Draper would have been impressed if he was alive in 2012. Furthermore, not all of the reactions to Kony 2012 were negative. International humanitarian organizations like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, and UNICEF have praised the efforts of Kony 2012 and Invisible Children, as well as several authors who had written books about Kony a few years prior. And the African Union did announce they would be sending a military force some 5,000 men strong to the regions of Africa where Kony was thought to be hiding in order to find and capture him. But other than that, and following the lackluster turnout in Cover the Night, Kony 2012 slowly started to fade from public consciousness, although eventually in late April 2012, we got our first look at US advisors assisting the Ugandan army in finding Kony. And then, a few weeks later in early May 2012, one of Kony's aides, Caesar Achelem, was captured by Ugandan forces.
Major General Caesar Achelem, a senior commander in the elusive Lord's Resistance Army, smiling but in the hands of the Ugandan forces. They say they ambushed him Saturday in the Central African Republic after tracking him for weeks in the jungle. The LRA has abducted tens of thousands of children to be used as fighters and sex slaves, but Achelem says he has nothing to apologize for.
In the art of war, the word sorry does not much exist. This is what I learned.
The LRA's leader, Joseph Kony, wanted by the International Criminal Court for war crimes, is still at large. The Ugandan army lead a regional military operation to hunt him down with US support. Some say Achelem's arrest is a sign that after 25 years, they are finally closing in.
It's worth noting that even before the release of Kony 2012, the capture of Joseph Kony was a low-key priority of the Obama administration. In 2010, 2 years before the video's release, Obama signed into law the Lord's Resistance Army Disarmament and Northern Uganda Recovery Act, which authorized the United States to assist Uganda in capturing Joseph Kony and disarming the Lord's Resistance Army. In October 2011, a few months before the video dropped, Obama announced he was sending 100 U.S. military personnel to Uganda to assist the local forces in their efforts to capture Joseph Kony. Even before Obama, as previously mentioned, following the 9/11 terrorist attacks, the Bush administration designated the Lord's Resistance Army as a terrorist organization. In 2005, the International Criminal Court indicted Joseph Kony for war crimes, and an international arrest warrant was circulated for him via Interpol in 2006. But then the years went on and people started to forget about Joseph Kony. I mean, fucking Psy blew up on the internet a few months later in late July and early August 2012 with Gangnam Style, the first video on YouTube to amass over 1 billion views. But internationally, with the rise of ISIS and its caliph Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi in 2014, whose brutality and reach surpassed that of Joseph Kony's, ISIS became the top priority for the international community. And I'm sure most of you remember that ISIS was the dominant global news topic from 2014 up until their eventual defeat in December 2017. By then, Joseph Kony was a distant memory. However, an interesting news bit about Kony did surface during that time. It was first reported in October 2017 that Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt were approached to be a part of a honey trap scheme to capture Joseph Kony. It was simple. Angelina and Brad would somehow contact Kony and invite him to dinner. Unable to resist such an offer, Kony would gladly meet Hollywood's hottest couple at the time for some dinner. But at that dinner, he would be ambushed by US Special Forces and be brought before the International Criminal Court to finally answer for his war crimes. This genius plan was the brainchild of Luis Moreno Ocampo, the same ICC prosecutor who appeared in the Kony 2012 documentary. He is an Argentine who served as a prosecutor at the ICC from 2003 to 2012. Many have asked, what would lead this guy to devise such a fanciful plan to capture Kony? Well, supposedly this guy has a thing for American celebrities and always does events with them. Perhaps he is projecting his celebrity worship onto Kony, who I am willing to bet has never seen any of Angelina Jolie's or Brad Pitt's movies before and probably doesn't even know who they are. Also, I think it's pretty apparent that Kony knows he's a wanted man. He even referred to Kony 2012 as propaganda and accused invisible children of being in bed with the Museveni government.
Kony's agent by the names of Labeja Justin Nyeko has released a dossier on the internet to counter them. The dossier is entitled Lord Resistance Army Stroke Movement Behind the Kony 2012 Facade. In his rhetoric, Labeja discredits the efforts by the invisible children to cause the arrest of their leader, Joseph Kony. Labeja also dwells at length on the decision of the US to involve itself in the war. He calls it the Rambo type of military campaign in Central Africa. Hilary Isiga, NTV.
Even if Kony knows Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, we'll even go so far as to say he's even a fan of theirs. He probably knows a dinner invite from them is a ruse. I mean, goddamn. So that leads us to where everyone is now in 2023, 11 years after Kony 2012. As for Uganda itself, It became meme-worthy in 2018 with the meme Ugandan Knuckles.
I think you know the way, Mr. Honey Addicted Man. Are you the queen? She is our queen. Everyone, shut up. The queen is singing.
Winnie the Pooh. Winnie the Pooh. I can't remember.
Everyone, clap for the queen.
Jason Russell is still an activist but is no longer involved with Invisible Children. Visible Children are still around but have largely scaled down their operations. Despite claiming that the organization is fraudulent, they are a legitimate charity, and in addition to raising awareness about Joseph Kony, have helped rehabilitate many of the former child soldiers of the Lord's Resistance Army, providing them with food, medical care, and education. They've helped build schools, radio towers, and small-scale infrastructure to warn of LRA attacks, and improve the lives of Ugandans who were victimized by the LRA. Well, they did end up spending much of the $20+ million on other videos and marketing, more than they should have. They are a reputable organization that does good work, so if you came here to listen to me shit on them, then you're in for a disappointment. In fact, on a small note, were you in high school at any point from the years 1995 to 2019? I was. If you were, then where did you go to see all your favorite pop-punk, post-hardcore, and metalcore bands such as A Day to Remember, Paramore, Bring Me the Horizon, Man Overboard, Asking Alexandria, Silverstein, 4 Years Strong, Mayday Parade, The Devil Wears Prada, and Falling in Reverse all play at the same time? Vans Warped Tour. Now, personally, not being a fan of the kind of bands who would play at Warped Tour, I never went. But for those who did, it's worth pointing out that the festival did help promote the cause of Invisible Children at one point. Now, let's try to answer the question. Where in the world is Joseph Kony? Well, as of the original upload date of this video in 2023, he is still at large somewhere in Africa. In fact, in early 2017, 5 years after Kony 2012 was released, the United States, the African Union, and the Ugandan military terminated its operations to capture Joseph Kony. With his LRA forces now down to less than 100 suspected members, he is no longer viewed as a threat, and therefore isn't worth spending more money, time, or resources on trying to find him. It is rumored that Kony is in poor health, with diabetes, and he's either age 61 or 62 years old at the time of this uploading. If he is in poor health, and down to less than 100 men, there's no way he can last much longer in the jungle on his own. As of 2022, Kony is suspected of hiding in the Darfur region of Sudan. Sudan's former president Omar al-Bashir was a backer of Kony's, and even though al-Bashir was overthrown in 2019 and is now facing the ICC for his war crimes, Kony may still have some friends with the new Sudanese government protecting him. Who knows, maybe he's partaking in the coup violence that's going on there right now. As for me, I predict we will probably get word of his death, surrender, or capture by 2030. If not, then whatever. If he's still confirmed to be alive and at large past 2030, I guess he deserves some kind of medal for being the world's greatest hide-and-seek champion, outlasting other highly wanted peoples in hiding such as Bin Laden, Whitey Bulger, and Ratko Mladic. And yes, Joseph Kony pretty much is as bad as they say he is. I guess some people can't help but fall for this idiotic tribalist mentality of, well, if the US or the CIA or the American media says this person's a bad guy, they're probably just being vilified for legitimately opposing US imperialism, or something like that. And the truth is, while the US government and its various agencies lie about people they don't like all the time, that doesn't mean everyone they name as a bad guy isn't a bad guy. Joseph Kony is as indefensible as they get, so ultimately yes, while war criminals like George W. Bush will likely get away with their war crimes, that doesn't mean we shouldn't pursue other war criminals like Joseph Kony. It is for the best that Joseph Kony be taken alive and made to answer for his crimes before the countless people he victimized over the years. But we'll see if that happens. And so I guess that does it for this edition of History of YouTube Sagas. A first. Previously we documented YouTubers and their drama, and then the copyright wars. But this is the first time we looked at a viral video on YouTube, and a documentary at that, and its impact on a global scale. You can say what you want about the hordes of slacktivists who momentarily took up invisible children's cause to make themselves feel good, but the truth is, I don't think any other topic covered on the show had much of an impact and publicity behind it as this one video. So, I'm curious, do you remember Kony 2012 when it came out? Were you one of the few brave people who participated in Cover the Night? Anyone in my comment section actually ever been to Uganda? Your feedback is much appreciated, just like if you're following me on YouTube, BitChute, Rumble, Parler, and Odyssey. The long-awaited conclusion to Spawnathon will be next, and then another History of YouTube Sagas episode will be out after that. I am the Black Lord of Fenrir. Slava.
Kony! Jason Russell!
You happened on the wrong guy's apartment, Kony. I've wanted to do this for a long time.